Welcome back to the Way of the Wandering Wizard. I am, as always, Robert Andrew Meredith Kennedy. I am a pure and open channel for the finest vibrations of divine love and light, made manifest here, in service to Gaia, and those who travel with her. In my last little video, I was sharing my time as a hospice healer. Throughout my time working at the hospice, or volunteering at the hospice, I was also actively engaged working on Ashdown Forest. My roots, or my feet deep into my roots. And forest bathing and all of that brought. I was still working at GT, and a lot of our work, clearly within high pressured environments, was all about team building. As a team we'd worked in order to facilitate the training under a similar intense way of working. What a wonderful way of living a life. Reliant on a strong team surrounding you. But I was experiencing that within the hospice, just a point in my life. And while I had not given him many treatments, and it was just one, a gentleman who passed at the hospice had left a sum of money specifically for Reiki teaching within the hospice. The hospice provided the space, a teaching space. It's a hospice with a teaching facility attached. It was ideally suited. So the hospice provided staff who wanted to take the course, and the bequeathment paid for my time as a teacher, while I gifted my time as a healer. As a teacher is part of the way that I make my living in the world. It's the way that I feed my children, as much as they eat, bless them. What an opportunity. As I look back, what an opportunity. Over the course of the courses, I think it was 18, maybe 20 members of staff of all walks, volunteers, nurses, outreach workers, members of management. The course was open to all, and a good selection took it up. We monitored performance, and there was change, shall we say, within those that were working with it at the time. Now, all things change. That's the path of life. And in many ways, many of us can be resistant to change. Part of the path of life. Well, the arty-farty witch had whittled herself a new broomstick and had flown off to her arty-farty retreat. Of course, there's a gap in management. Over this period of time, there were a lot of changes at the hospice. I mean, understandably, and the staff move in and out. It's a challenging environment. And there was a distinct shift in management, and with a change in management comes a change in management style. Now, as I sit here wisely years down the line, nothing personal, but to say that I was resistant to some of the new management styles, I think that's fair to say that was the truth. Was I warned by caring members of the spiritual community at hospice not to stick my head above the parapet and interfere in business that wasn't ours? Did I ignore that to my cost? Yes. Needless to say, as management changed, ideas were mixed. There was a lot of movement. And in many ways, the family, the way that we were working at the time, that had really built over years, was changing. It's a hospice. Well, part of me may have been irritable, shall we say, with aspects of it. That wasn't my prime focus. My prime focus was patients and families, looking after staff. I spent a lot of time working with staff and talking to staff. I felt in many ways at hospice that I would be of service to perform a similar role that I did within GT and many other organisations I work with. Working with the team, taking on board their fears, concerns and issues and presenting them to the management in a quiet calm. Have we considered this personality type, a very different Bob from the Bob that was at the MOD. Alright, not quite as good at the job that I thought I was, but I'd certainly gained an understanding of people and was keen to share that. Sadly, the more that I tried to offer advice in a wizardly way, the more that was seen as interference. Things came to a head, as they always do, over a simple policy change. While the work of the hospice continued in homes, the therapeutic work was to become focused at the hospice, and home visiting was, I don't know, something that was in change. I personally have a moral code. I take an oath as a healer to do no harm or no conscious harm, and to be there with the people that I'm working with. Not 5 minutes, not 10 minutes, not 1 hour, however long it takes. It's part of my path in hospice, part of what it had taught me, part of being present for people, shall we say. And I felt that was being challenged. I was called to a meeting. I feel that I put my cause across, or the cause of many, that we'd be failing patients. I mentioned my oath, let's just say that my resistance was not appreciated. And I was asked, in no uncertain terms, to confine my activities to volunteering as a hospice healer within the grounds of the hospice, within the treatment rooms and day service, and of course working on the ward. As a hospice, as much as there is a part of me that often stands up, I've been through it, Fort House did. Yeah, I don't know. The more evolved, the part that's moved through the accident was just leave it. This is not a place to be fighting. This is not a place that needs conflict. This is a hospice. This is the way it is. That's the way that you thought it was. Just let it go. Do what you're good at doing. And for many months, that was my pattern. I'd still visit the ward on full moons, new moons, but my work had gone from the broader community to the point focus at the hospice. Now, my day of days, I was working with a family who were very, very connected spiritually. They were very aware, very awake. My mother was in transition. I'd worked with the family on occasions and was called to her room. What an energy. What an energy. As various family members drifted in and out, most of whom were very aware. It's just the energy built. It was just, it was approaching a full moon. The energy was there. And I have to say that when giving lots of healing, you can get into quite drifty states. It's not an excuse, it is an explanation. On my return back through the hospice, ready to go and pick my children up from school, I saw a member of staff who just looked shattered. I think it was one of those weeks that we often got in hospice where many old friends are passing. I asked if she was okay. She just said that she was tired, and without even thinking, I stepped into her space and placed my hands on her shoulders, uninvited. Cardinal mistake as a healer. Throughout my time at hospice, even those lying in beds, almost in transition, there had always been a consensual acknowledgement, would you like healing? Not a defence, as I said, going from that state of working with everybody in a room to that moment was quite a shock to me and to the member of staff concerned. I went off, picked up my children, went off and did Cubs and Scouts, mortified. I'd apologised profusely twice. Yes, I fully accepted what I'd done. Was I expecting to be held to account for that? Yes, of course. I was certainly expecting something. It was a full moon. I went on, as I did throughout my Saturday, had a normal day with the family. I felt that call. So I went into hospice. Wasn't aware of any great issue. Sat in the quiet room, made my connections, did some work on the corridors. There was a change in nursing staff. They were, unlike some of the old school, thank you for being here, a little bit, why are you still here? I don't know, just one of those nuances you pick up on the night. Whereas to some, this may well have been of support, to others it was just a weird inconvenience, and I accept and understand that. I think the reason I was there was because of one soul in particular, who I would have missed. I'd been called into a couple of rooms, and it's often the case at night, I tapped on a door and realised that I was at the wrong door, from the room that I was supposed to be going into. The door opened, I apologised. I'm so sorry, I think I'm supposed to be at the room next door. The lady's son was stood at the door, who just went, "You've got to be Reiki Bob. Mum's spoken so much of you." And I was gifted a beautiful memory of sitting in a space with another family as she lay peacefully in her bed, curled round her grandson. That was the last patient I physically worked with in hospice. When I got home on the Sunday, I did as I always did. I wrote up my notes. In doing so, I saw an email. Could I come into the hospice Monday morning, first things? Clearly, there was an issue from the Friday. On arrival, I was escorted to the manager's, to the director's office, whereupon I was effectively asked my version. Yes, of course, I'd walked into her office. Yes, of course, I was fully aware. Yes, of course, I understood the position that I put the hospice in. And so I was asked to leave. I was expecting a disciplinary of some level. The fact that as I walked from the hospice, that brought up so much of Fort Housted, is in many ways, from where I sit now, part of my journey. It was all coming up to be cleared. Far from plummeting, as I had post Fort Housted. A part of me had just accepted what was a resonant working way was now different. What was required there at the hospice, the way that things were working then, were different. I understood that my time had served those souls, that I was there at whatever level. I'd made peace with my own death. I'd assisted those that where I could, and supported families where I could in theirs. It was a wonderful chapter of my life. And while part of me feels that I should have stayed working there, the other part of me knows that I did. That connection to the hospice remains. Although, like many of the healers, we work distantly now as part of a support network. We do still work in the heart of the hospice. Now, over the course of my little run into that incident, I had of course caused a few ripples, interferences with management. I received a wonderful letter from the hospice, thanking me for my time and inviting me to appeal, while a part of me, very much, didn't want to fight. I did feel, as I am now, I wanted to have my say. I sat down and presented 4 pages of A4. The deeper meanings, the understandings, the ethics of hospice work, core values, and so much more besides. I feel it was an eloquent statement, and I needed to get it off my chest. Within that epic tome was one paragraph which basically said, yes, of course, I made a mistake. I apologise profoundly for that mistake and for any harm it caused. But ultimately, it's just one mistake. But that mistake was enough. Quite clearly, I was informed that there's a lot of the problems were my continual interference with things that I should be leaving well alone. And in the process of being asked to appeal, I'd said, yes, I've done it. Offered 3.5 pages of interfering with hospice practice. Also, it was seen. That said, there was an absolute understanding, person to person, and a handshake, and an understanding of all that I had given for the hospice. And the simple fact is that they were in a very difficult position, which now I absolutely accept. People's personal space is vitally important to our well-being. The fact that in those healing states, or in the way that I work in the world, slightly more tactilely than many, is something that hospice has most certainly taught me. The fact that I'm still find things to object to in standard management practices that ripple through all aspects of my world, our world, healthcare, all of these transport, all of these services that now run under these same systems. For me, and for many who see a similar world, it's not a way forward, it's a way backwards. What we gain out of life is what we focus on life, and if we keep making it about money, the bottom dollar, efficiency, and all of those systems that seem to be in place in the world, I think we do to very much to the cost of our souls. So, with one door closing, very much on my time as a hospice healer, apart from absent work, I left the hospice. Many of my patients came with. They found me in private practice. I continue to work and will continue to work to support families going through any amount of crisis. It's what we came here to do. So on a sunny bank holiday, thank you for listening to, as I look back on it, a most wonderful chapter of my life. A little ripple at the end, a series of reminders, things to let go, ready to move forward. I emerged from my experiences of the hospice wiser, more compassionate, quieter. And for that, I can but thank you. Thank you for listening to the witterings and wanderings of an old wise wizard while he works his way through the world. Take care, be well, and blessed be.